Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om. So welcome, Namaste. I bow to the indwelling spirit within each and every one of us. Okay. So today's seminar is the third part of the series on pathways to self-realization. And today we're going to explore the two very famous paths, which are called Kundalini Yoga and the Kriya Yoga. So these two paths at first seems a little different, but there's a lot of overlap and similarity between the two, and I'll go into that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into these two paths. And obviously, for most of my last 30 years, I've been mostly focused on Kriya Yoga. So that is obviously a path that is near and dear to me. But when I started off on my journey, on my spiritual journey, back in the 1960s, there was not much information that I could get. And, where I was, my main way of getting information about spiritual paths and spiritual techniques was through a few books. And I couldn't even afford to buy the books. I was only a teenager. So I actually got them from the library. And I was always going to the library to look at what's available and what is interesting on the spiritual path. And there were two books at that time that caught my interest and had been very influential in my life. Okay, at that time, the first book is the Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And I think, like many people, I was attracted and hooked onto this, on his descriptions of all the great things that he mentions in the book, and about Babaji, this mysterious immortal being, and also the description of this path called Kriya Yoga. So I was very attracted to it, and it had a profound impact on me. But unfortunately, for many years, I was not able to pursue that path, because where I was, there was just no person to lead me onto that path at that time. And the other book was the complete illustrated book of yoga. And that was authored by Swami Vishnu Devananda. So you may know very much about Yogananda, but you may not know who Swami Vishnu Devananda is. He was a young disciple of Swami Sivananda of Rishikesh. Okay, and he came to the US and North America, and he started all the Sivananda yoga farms, and set up many retreat centers, and did a lot of work for his guru in the U.S. And so he offered this book called Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga. And in it, he talks about Hatha Yoga mainly, but it was very much targeted towards the Kundalini. Okay, so I first heard about Kundalini from this book, and it's strange, but when Yogananda talked about the Kriya Yoga, he never mentioned Kundalini in the popular book that he authored. But obviously, we will tie it all together, and that Kriya Yoga has much to do with Kundalini. But at the time of Yogananda, he left many things for only his personal teachings and to his disciples. So he did not talk about it in the popular book. Okay. But again, I at that time was very difficult for me. I mean, there were techniques mentioned, and Hatha Yoga, in that book he mentioned the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, okay, and Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and so I was able to look at those, but they were very difficult to understand. His book was easier, it had a lot of pictures, and so I actually followed that book early on in the 60s and tried to do my asanas and the pranayama from that book. And later on, when I came to the US in the early 70s, I was able to meet a lot of practitioners, and they would give me information that were missing from books, because you can't get everything, especially on esoteric techniques, from books. Okay, one of the reasons I couldn't find anything that I could practice from the autobiography is because the pathway of Kriya Yoga has to be given personally by an authorized acharya or teacher. So it's not supposed to be put on books or on the web, or even, in any other way. Okay, although currently there are descriptions and techniques put on books and on the web, they are not authorized. Okay? They are by well-meaning but confused students who think that if they give the techniques, it will help other people. But it doesn't always work like that, and unfortunately, it's their responsibility. But even now, we don't give out the Kriya techniques just in a book or on the web. But Hatha Yoga and Kundalini techniques were widely described. But if you read the source books of these techniques, they are very short and they leave out a lot of details. So you can't really practice deeply or have confidence in your practice by just studying from a book. So I was lucky that I was able to meet some fellow practitioners on the path who had studied in India and were in Berkeley and in LA as well when I visited there. And I was able to learn about some of these things that were missing from the books. But still, it wasn't a very complete practice that I was doing. It was mostly Hatha Yoga. And it seems that from reading about the books, and then there was a book later on that I looked at by Swami Shivananda himself called Kundalini Yoga. And in that, he is basing the techniques from the Kundalini Upanishad. And so it was more comprehensive and much more explanatory. But still, books are no substitute for actually having a master or a authorized teacher to help you on the path. Okay, so it was not always easy for me, and I was never as comfortable as I would like to be. Okay, now when I came to the US in the 1970s, I actually was exposed to another different form of Kundalini Yoga. It was founded by the Yogi Bhajan, and I met a lot of his students, and I had some publications from his center in LA, and I practiced them on my own. Okay, and they were very much Hatha Yoga based, plus mantras from the Sikh Dharma or the Sikh religion. Okay, because Yogi Bhajan himself was a Sikh. So I also looked at that, but I was confused because from what I learned from the traditional Kundalini Yoga, they had descriptions of the chakras and the nadis, and in each chakra you had the different deities that you need to connect with to get the chakra into the higher state and to arise, to get the kundalini in each of the chakra to awaken. So, and then, but when I studied the Kundalini Yoga of Yogi Bhajan, it didn't seem to be anything like that. And so it was very confusing. And so I actually did not pursue that very much because I felt that it was not in line with what I felt was the traditional kind. It doesn't mean that it wasn't any good. It just didn't resonate with me. And it's good to know that even though at that time I didn't follow that particular path, I actually had an occasion to meet Yogi Bhajan in a Sikh temple, a Sikh Gurdwara later. And I had a great experience because I was sitting in the back and he was giving a talk. And then all of a sudden, somehow our attention got to each other. He looked at me and I felt a great energy transmission from him. It was like a, strong energy blast from him. And then he smiled and I was like, wow, that's something. And so, obviously he was a charismatic and powerful yogi. All right, so that's just to let you know, though, even though I never practiced very much the Kundalini Yoga of Yogi Bhajan, he himself was a powerful yogi with energy transmission capabilities. So that's just to let you know. Okay, that my experience. Okay, but so I kept, going from, if you heard my previous sessions, you would remember that I was actually in Berkeley practicing the Nyingma, the Buddhist path, the Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhist, and doing the preliminaries of those techniques. But since I was a student, I was either studying or going to classes, studying for the exams, or practicing my spiritual path. I didn't have any social life. Okay, so I hardly had any friends, and I was just so focused in those years that I had time to practice all sorts of stuff. Okay, so I also practiced the Kundalini Yoga because I found that the Nyingma was very much on meditation, but the preliminary techniques that I was doing had nothing to do with pranayama or even with the Hatha Yoga of asanas. And I was very much into asanas in those days. And I felt great energy, and that it helped me a lot when I was doing the asanas, relaxed me, and then the pranayama helped me to focus the energy. So I felt that even though I wanted to practice and go in deeply into the Vajrayana, it would be many years before they would teach anything like pranayama. So I was practicing the pranayama from Hatha Yoga. And it turns out that they were complementary, and they didn't interfere with each other. So I was able to complement each other. Okay, so eventually, obviously, I did not pursue the Kundalini Yoga as much as I would like. Because in the time of like 1989 or so, I actually got the opportunity to get initiated and learn the Kriya Yoga. Okay, and I joined and went to the Ananda Church of Self-Realization. And their Swami Kriyananda, who is a disciple of Yogananda, was giving initiations, and also his disciples were also giving initiations in Kriya Yoga, and that's how I started on my Kriya Yoga path. Okay, so the Kundalini Yoga I practiced on and off for many years before I started the Kriya. And then when I started the Kriya, I sort of dropped the Kundalini Yoga. Okay, so it took me some years to understand the connection between them. Okay, because it turns out that Kriya Yoga also is a type of Kundalini Yoga. Okay, it is my current master, my real master in this lifetime, Yogi Raj Gurunath Siddhanath, actually calls it Kundalini Kriya Yoga, to emphasize that the purpose of the practices of Kriya Yoga is to awaken and move the Kundalini from the base chakra to the third eye and then to the crown. And then so you awaken your crown chakra and go into the liberated state of self-realization. Okay, so obviously it takes time for us to understand. So because if you just look at the techniques, they are very different. And you wonder what's going on with why is it that they're also both about awakening the Kundalini. Okay, so in order to understand that, I'm going to take a little time to explain how Kundalini Yoga works and how Kriya Yoga works. And then when you understand this, then I'll go back into talking about some of my experiences and about different types of Kundalini and Kriya Yogas. Okay, so the methodology of Kundalini Yoga is that you basically work on the chakras. So you have to understand all about your subtle body. You need to know about the nadis, the energy channels that are in the pranamaya kosh, the energy body. So you have to understand you have a physical body, an energy body, a emotional mind body, intellectual mind body, and the Dharma or karma body. Okay, so it's also called bliss body, by the way, but that's a separate thing. So these 5 sheaths, or we call them like bodies, like, you have the Russian dolls, one inside each other. If you've ever seen those dolls, they're big like that. You open one, there's another one in there. You open it, another one in there. So we're all like that, layered. We have these subtler bodies. Okay, and the energy body, the Pranamaya Kosh, has these energy channels. Okay, which is like the arteries and the veins in the physical body. They transmit blood. The nadis, they transmit or channel the pran, the life force energy. Okay, so the chakras are actually storage centers and transmission centers, as well as conversion centers. They're like the power stations. They take the pran, store them, and transmit them to where they're needed. Okay, so you have to learn about the nadis and the chakras, and then you actually have to use techniques to increase the pran in each of the chakras. And there can be different orders of doing it. Okay, but you can increase the pran and raise the level of each of your chakras. And there are different ways of doing it. Okay, you can do it with asanas. You can do it with mantras. You can do it with meditation, visualization, and you can do it with pranayama. So all of these techniques are put together and integrated, and you can use all of them to increase the pran and raise the vibration of each of your chakras. There are some Kundalini systems and some groups which mainly focus on mantras. Some, mainly focus on pranayama and asanas to awaken the chakras. And so that would be more like a hatha yoga type approach. Whereas the tantric Kundalini approach would use more mantras and visualization as well. Okay, so they start working on the chakras, and the main chakras they're working on are the 6 chakras that we all know about from popular texts and also from our own workshops that we've been doing. So you have the base chakra, the Muladhara chakra, then you have the sacral, the Swadhisthana chakra, Manipur chakra at the navel, the Anahat at the heart center, then you have the Vishuddhi at the throat, and then the Agya, Ajna, Ajna chakra, the third eye center. Okay, so in order to practice Kundalini Yoga, you would first awaken and heal and raise the energy of each of these chakras first. Okay, so there can be different orders of doing it. Okay, so in some tantric Kundalini yoga situations, groups, they would focus on the navel chakra first, the Manipur chakra. Okay, so in the Manipur chakra, then you have 10-petal lotus. Okay, so yellow in color, and in the this 10-petal lotus is the animal of a ram, which is concerned with desires. And then you have the divine deity is Rudra, an aged Rudra, who destroys all negativities and desires. Okay. And the divine mother is present there in the form of Lakini. And divine Lakini has 4 heads and 4 arms. In one arm is giving a blessing. The other arm is saying, don't be afraid. Okay. And then a third arm, she's holding a Vajra, the lightning, a power of lightning. And then in another arm, she's holding the Shakti fire. So she has Vajra lightning and Shakti fire. So the Manipur Chakra, okay, the Jam City, the city of jams, actually has very much a lot of Shakti power in there, lightning and fire. Okay, the Manipur Chakra is the site of the fire element. And the beat sound for this this particular chakra is rang. Okay, so you can utilize such things to meditate on it and utilize sounds that vibrate with that particular chakra. So if you want to awaken the Kundalini in the Manipur chakra, you need to learn all of these things. The number of petals, and on each petal is a Sanskrit consonant. It starts with da, dum, dum, and then all the way to pum, okay, or fum. So pa is the second last letter, the 9th letter, and then pa and pa, pum or fum is the 10th letter. So you need to know all the letters in the Manipur chakra, all the different colors, the characteristics. Okay, so that's how one would practice the Kundalini Yoga, but you have to learn this from for each one of the chakras. For instance, the Ajna chakra, the third eye center, is a 2-petal lotus. So it has the letters hum and sham, and the beach sound is an om with a bindu on top. Okay. The Divine Mother Shakti there, okay, is a Hakini and has 6 arms and 6 heads. Each head has 3 eyes. Okay, so you have to know what is being held by the hands of each, because she has a book on the one hand, and she's also saying don't be afraid, and a hand for blessing. Okay, then she has a skull on a stick in one hand, a rosary on another hand. So you have to know all about what it is that she's holding and the meaning of each one of them when you meditate. What is she wearing? The color, all of these things are important to be able to work on that particular chakra. So that actually is the main first part. Most of the time, the Kundalini Yoga practitioner would spend a lot of time practicing and meditating, and doing either asanas or pranayama, the mantras, and visualizing different deities at each of the chakras. Okay? So in some Kundalini path, you would start with the third eye first. Okay? In another one, you would start with the navel first. But normally you never start just at the base chakra, because if you try to work up from the base, then you will get stuck, and there could be a lot of problems. Okay, so you need to open up higher centers, either the navel, the heart, or the third eye center, before you awaken the Kundalini in the root chakra. Okay, so you also need to understand that Kundalini is actually our hidden higher potential power, our strength, our energy. Okay? The first layer of Kundalini is Pran. We already have Pran, because that's the life force. That's how we do pranayama. That's how our cells are all alive, is because of this Pran. The Pran is what keeps us alive. That's the first layer of Kundalini. We're trying to awaken another layer, a more powerful form of Kundalini. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. So, it's like you have 1.5 volt battery. Now you want to go with a 12 volt car battery. You need to increase the power. A 1.5 volt little battery is not going to be able to start your car. Okay, so you need a stronger battery. But that's just the second level. Then you have the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh levels of Kundalini. Okay, where the higher levels are like lightning. Can you compare your little battery to a lightning? That's how powerful the Kundalini can be. That's what Vajra is, a lightning holder. Okay, so you have to understand there's different levels of Kundalini. So that's very important to understand. It's not just one layer and one level of awakening. Even the second, third level can be very powerful. And if you're not prepared, if your chakras are not ready, then the energy is going to get stuck. And it won't be able to move higher, and you will have lots of maladies. Okay, so that would be called like Kundalini syndrome. But if you can have pain or emotional blockages, emotional trauma, physical trauma. But that's only if you don't follow a correct pathway. If you have a guide and a correct pathway, then you won't run into such problems. But if you don't, then you could run into problems. Okay. People always think they can just study from the books. I mean, I love books, but you cannot practice from books only. Okay, so forget that. Can you build a nuclear reactor or a nuclear bomb just from books? If you could blow yourself up. Okay, so it's not a good idea. We don't even do chemistry just without a teacher, right? So it's important to have a guide, right? So the first part of the Kundalini Yoga is working on the chakras. But then the next part, after you have awakened the chakras, then the Kundalini Yoga actually moves into techniques which go into controlling the Pran or the Kundalini into the different nadis. Okay, so it would try to move the energy along the central channel, the Sushumna Nadi. So the practices of moving the pran or Kundalini Shakti into the central channel is actually done after the chakras are more or less awakened to a certain degree. Okay, don't think they're going to be all fully awakened. There's no such thing. Okay, as I mentioned, there's many degrees of awakening. So when I say they awaken, that means they awaken to a degree that would allow the next level of Kundalini to rise. And then you work on them again, and another level of Kundalini can rise. You can go from self-realization to God realization to cosmic consciousness. You can move from Hamsa to Paramahansa to Siddha, and from Siddha to Avdut. Okay, then you won't be able to even stay on this plane of existence. You'd have to go into a different plane of existence if you want to awaken the two highest layers of Kundalini. Okay, so up to the fifth layer is possible, but after that, probably not, as far as I know. Okay, so in the next part of Kundalini Yoga, which you don't see a lot about, it's actually to move the energy along pathways. Okay? The first part is about the chakras. And then after that, they move the pran and or the Kundalini Shakti in the pathways using pranayama techniques, or using your mind to move the energy. It depends on the level you're at. So that is the way you would do the Kundalini Yoga, and it takes years to awaken and move each chakra. So sometimes a person would work on a chakra for a year or 2 years. Okay, maybe even more. So, and they would actually get different states of consciousness by just working on one chakra, because each chakra has a Shakti. So don't think the Kundalini Shakti is only at the root chakra. That's how people think of it, is like, oh, it's asleep in the Kundalini, in the Muladhara chakra. But actually the Shakti, a portion of the Kundalini is in each one of the major chakras. Okay, so you can have a Kundalini awakening at each one of the chakras too. Different from having it awaken throughout. Okay, but that's an experience that the Kundalini practitioner will have also. Now, so how about Kriya Yoga? A distinctive feature of the true Kriya Yoga is actually the Kriya Pranayama. Okay, that's what Yogananda ji talks about in his chapter on Kriya Yoga in the Autobiography. He describes the Kriya Pranayama. And this Kriya Pranayama is actually a spinal breathing technique. Okay, so you are moving the pran inside the Sushumna Nadi, the central channel. Okay. So in Kriya Yoga, the approach actually is to work on your main nadi first, the Sushumna Nadi, which is currently not open and blocking the movement of the Kundalini. Because the Kundalini can only move up the Sushumna Nadi, okay, the central channel, the middle way. So when the Lord Buddha talks about the middle way, the esoteric practitioners, they smile and say, he's talking about the Sushumna Nadi, the central channel. Okay. Now, in Kriya Yoga, we work on that central channel first. And then we move prana in the central channel, and as the central channel passes through all the chakras, the 6 chakras along the spine, it will purify and get rid of the blockages in the chakras while moving the prana in the central channel. And then also in Kriya Yoga, we have the Omkar Kriya, where by the sound of Om, we are elevating and opening and healing and expanding the chakras. So in Kriya Yoga, we're starting on the other way. We're actually on the other side. We're first go with the opening of the central channel, and then we have the other technique of opening the chakras, but instead of focusing on the different attributes, the beach sounds, the letters on the petals, and the deities in each of the chakras, we are relying on the Om. Okay, this is in line with the sage Patanjali, great sage Patanjali. He basically said, just intone the sound of Om. That's it. Everything is taken care of if you can tune into the sound of Om, and by the power and vibration of this birthing hum of the universe, you'll be able to open up all your chakras. Okay, so in Kriya Yoga, we're relying on the sound of Om to open the chakras. And we have different mantra for the pranayama, the Kriya Pranayama. And we also have the technique of opening up the third eye center called the Jyoti Mudra. Okay, so we are focusing on the third eye center and opening up the central channel so that when the third eye center becomes very powerful, very strong, when it's built up so that you can see the star there, when you see the ring of light, and then in the star in the middle, then the Divine Mother is attracted to move up, because it's the eye of Shiva. And the Divine Mother wants to meet up with her Lord Shiva. So if you are able to manifest the eye of Shiva, then the Divine Mother will automatically come. Okay, that is the pathway of Kriya Yoga. Okay, so it's going from one side, the one way to arrive to get the Kundalini to rise. Kundalini Yoga is moving from the other way. They don't work on the central channel until after the chakras are awakened. Okay, so it's a different approach to getting to the same thing, which is to raise the Kundalini. So the Kriya Yoga is definitely a Kundalini path. So that's very much, you have to understand that very well. And also there is no conflict. Okay, it's just that if you spend too much time on each chakra like you're doing in Kundalini, and you won't have enough time to do your Kriya Pranayama. Right? So that's why it's good to focus on one. And if you're interested and you have lots of time, you can spend a little time on some other technique to improve as a supplement. but you can't practice two paths at the same time. Okay, be very careful. Even though I do teach the Kundalini techniques, my main focus is on Kriya Yoga. And I can tell you, you cannot practice two paths at the same time. You can focus either on the Kundalini or the Kriya Yoga. And because you just only have so much time. Are you going to, if you spend 8 hours a day on your practice, then you may be able to spend 2 hours on some auxiliary practices. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the techniques of Kundalini Yoga can be helpful. Okay, they can help to open some blockages if you feel that they're there. I mean, sometimes when you're moving in the Kriya Yoga, sometimes you feel at certain times, like I feel like my throat chakra is a little bit blocked. And then I would use some of the techniques of Kundalini Yoga and unblock and open up the throat chakra. And then I can practice my Kriya better. Okay, so that's just a way of utilizing that some techniques. It doesn't mean you're trying to do two paths. Okay. There's not enough time in the day to get self-realization while you're parallel doing two paths at the same time. And doesn't make sense. You don't need to. If you have confidence in the path that you're going on, you can just focus on one of them. You don't have to focus on two. Okay. The only reason I had learned Kundalini Yoga was because there were many years that I was not able to learn and get my master, to find my master, Kriya Yoga master. Okay, so that's why I practiced the Kundalini first for yoga for some years. That's why I'm familiar with those techniques. Okay. The other thing is that although I had a lot of guidance and help from fellow practitioners and yogis on the path, a great breakthrough was actually when I had experience. And I talked about it in some other session where I had the experience. I think when I was talking about the siddhas and the tantras, when I was talking about the siddhas, I had a great experience in Palani with Lord Muruga. And after that experience, over a period of time, I had lots of blessings and visions from Lord Muruga. And I remembered a lot of the things that I had done in connection with the Kundalini Yoga in previous lifetimes. So I actually have memories of practicing such techniques in previous times. So I know that I've already done those, and for whatever reason, I reached certain states, but I was still not able to make the breakthrough that I wanted to or did not complete. Okay, so we have all tried many different things and pathways in previous lifetimes. Okay, all of you have. I mean, if you're here listening to me talk about Kundalini and Kriya Yoga, you know, you're not simple people. You know, you somehow, you may not remember, but somewhere along the line, you may have practiced many esoteric techniques in previous lifetimes. And I had the great blessing from Lord Muruga to remember some of those. So it removed a lot of my confusion about some of these techniques and what works and what didn't work and things like that. Okay, so that's why I have great confidence in Kundalini Yoga also. Now, as far as the Kriya Yoga is concerned, as I mentioned that I spent a couple of years learning the Kriya Yoga from the Ananda Church of Self-Realization. And then one day, actually it was the evening, actually after work, I would go to the bookstore in, I guess it's Sunnyvale. I forget whether it's Sunnyvale or Palo Alto, where the bookstore was. Anyway, it was a spiritual bookstore. And in the spiritual bookstore, I found in a bulletin board a poster for Kriya Yoga. And at that time, obviously, I already practicing a form of Kriya Yoga, which was given by Yogananda ji to Swami Kriyananda, Donald Walters. And so I was interested. I said, wow, this guy looks impressive. And it was a yogi with a little turban and then with belts all around. And I was very much attracted. I usually have no feeling for going to see spiritual masters or stuff like that. Many years, I always said, Osho, I didn't want to go see. Swami Muktananda, no, I don't need to see. I mean, they're all great masters, but I said, I don't feel a connection. This one, I immediately felt a connection, and I immediately called the organizer and said, well, how can I come and meet this yogi? Okay. And he was giving a satsang, I think a day or two later on a Friday night. And so I got directions. I drove there in the evening, and then I met the organizers, a couple of people, and they brought me in and sat me down, gave me a little orientation about this yogi coming from India, from a place called Pune. And he's had experience of Babaji. And so he, is a very powerful yogi. So I said, okay, I just want to see, experience something. So, we went into a room around the time when he's supposed to come. And, I didn't know, it said it was going to be a 2-3 hour satsang. So I will sit near a wall, like what I'm doing here right now. And so in case when I get tired on sitting on the floor, I can lean back. Okay. So unless you have no choice, otherwise you'll be, very tired after a couple of hours sitting on the floor. Okay. So I was, I was doing my meditation. I was doing my Kriya. And then when this magnetic figure came in, he sat on a chair. And then he started talking, and then it was very engrossing. And then he said, "I'm going to give you some experiences." And then all of a sudden, I felt this pressure, this energy on my chest. And he said, "I'm now transmitting Shaktipat to your heart center. Okay, can you feel it?" And it was so powerful. I was actually stuck on the wall. Okay, so I said, wow, I couldn't move from the wall. I actually tried to make an effort, but I couldn't. I was actually stuck there, and I couldn't move. And I said, well, this seems like some real yogi here. He's not just all talk. He can actually manifest his Shakti, his Kundalini. So his Kundalini must be more than just awakened, because you can awaken the Kundalini, but it has to be at a much higher level of awakening before you can actually send it out and transmit it. Okay, so I said, wow, that's great. And that's how I met my master, Yogi Raj Gurunath Siddhanath. And I've been following him for almost 30 years and practicing according to his guidance. Okay, so that is how I started really on my pathway of Kriya Yoga. Okay, so now Unlike Kundalini Yoga, where there's really no central lineage and it's unclear, anybody can say they're practicing Kundalini Yoga and they can say this is Kundalini Yoga, that is Kundalini Yoga. But, that you don't really know who's the authority and where it is coming from. Okay? Unlike that, which is very dispersed, the Kriya Yoga lineage is very straightforward, because we know from the autobiography and from all I experienced, the current form of Kriya Yoga that we are practicing, it comes from this great yogi called Lahiri Mahasaya. Okay, and in 1860, he was initiated into Kriya Yoga in the Himalayas by a mysterious figure he calls Babaji. Now, Yogi Yogananda ji, he makes it very clear, Babaji is just an honorific name that Lahiri Mahasaya called his guru, who is the Param Guru of Yogananda. I mean, Yogananda's guru is Sri Yukteswar, and Sri Yukteswar's guru is Lahiri Mahasaya. Lahiri Mahasaya's guru is Babaji, whom he called Babaji. But in the autobiography, Yogananda also said, Babaji is just a name that we give to this person. He's really a great Mahavatar, and he has many names. And all those names, he gave a list of them. They're all different forms of avatars of Lord Shiva. Okay, whether you call him Shiv Baba or whatever it is, they're names of different manifestations of Lord Shiva. It's not just a normal person, not a yogi, just okay. So this Babaji, which I will talk a little bit about in a few minutes, because he's very important to not just Kriya Yoga, but also to Kundalini Yoga. Yes, even to Kundalini Yoga. So this our Kriya Yoga that we practice, okay, comes from Babaji through Lahiri Mahasaya. And Lahiri Mahasaya had a number of disciples. One of them is Sri Yukteswar. So in India, you will have Kriya Yogi groups which are from the other disciples of Lahiri Mahasaya also from his own family. Okay, so he has a family lineage of Kriya Yoga. Okay. And then one of the disciples is Sri Yukteswar, and Sri Yukteswar had a number of disciples. Okay, very famous. There's Satyananda Giri. Of course, there is Paramahansa Yogananda, who is the one that made it possible for us in the West to know about Kriya Yoga, or even in the East, because otherwise the Kriya Yoga would be something only in a small area of Bengal in India. Okay, but Yogananda made it world famous through the organization he founded, and also through his books and his personal ministry. So it's through his efforts that we can all enjoy the benefit of this Kriya Yoga. So it's his contribution. Okay, so now there are other besides Satyananda Giri, there was Hariharananda Giri, who also worked in the West much later, and he has groups of people that are authorized to teach Kriya Yoga. Even in the West, Paramahansa Yogananda had other disciples that, like Swami Kriyananda or other people that are spread out in the US, who were authorized by him to teach Kriya Yoga. So the organization is not the only one that is able to give his version of the Kriya Yoga. So you have all these different Kriya Yoga groups out there in India, in the US. There are Kriya groups all over the world. Okay, but what is the common factors for this Kriya Yoga that we are talking about? The authentic Kriya Yoga, first of all, it has to come from Babaji, right? It has to trace back to him. It should trace back to Lahiri Messiah, although there are people who can claim to have experienced Babaji and get their own version of practices of Kriya Yoga, and they may be authentic or not. It's not my concern. I'm just saying it's not the same pathway, not the same lineage. Okay, so it has to have Lahiri Messiah in that lineage. Okay? And the techniques have to involve the Kriya Pranayama, the spinal breath. Without the spinal breath, then it is not the Kriya that was given by Babaji to Lahiri Messiah and introduced by Swami Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda. Because as Yogananda explained, the spinal breath, the Kriya Pranayama, is the main evolutionary technique of Kriya. So in ordinary terms, when we live our life, a normal person living the life on earth, every year the sun actually provides an evolutionary impetus in each of our chakras. So like in January, maybe in the root chakra, then it goes to the Swadhisthana after a month. So in 6 months, it travels up here, and then it goes back down in the other 6 months. And so in 1 year, the sun has evolved. The sun's energy, our sun, Surya, is evolving us in 1 year by evolving each of our chakras. So it is a great work of our sun. Did you know that? That the sun is evolving us while we're just living our life in this earth. It's a great work of the great being that lives in the sun. So what Yogananda said is that if we make that effort, if we are not content with just 1 year of evolution in one terrestrial year, if we want to make it faster, if we do the spinal breath through the chakras, along the Sushumna Nadi to the third eye, and then go back down. Okay, going up in 15 seconds, coming down in 15 seconds, in 30 seconds of Kriya Pranayama, one breath, you have done the work of 1 year of spiritual evolution. That is the blessing of Babaji. Babaji has given this Kriya Pranayama that we, with one breath, we can evolve 1 year. So if you do 144 breaths in 1 day of the Kriya Pranayama, 144 repetition, which takes 72 minutes at most. Most of you may not be able to do 15 seconds up, 15 seconds down, but that's a good number. Okay, very experienced Kriya yogis can do 22 seconds up and 22 seconds down for 44 seconds. That's even more powerful. But, you know, my master says 30 seconds is good enough. It's sufficient to evolve you. So if you can do that one breath, and if you do 144 breaths in 72 minutes, In those 72 minutes, you have evolved 144 years. Right? It's in one day if you do that. Right? So, you know, you can evolve 30,000 years or more in a year. And you know, in 10 years, you could evolve 100,000 years or more. The yardstick that Yogananda teaches is that, like, or even my master teaches the same things, 1,000,000 years of spiritual evolution will take us to the next stage. We will be evolved enough to reach the next stage of our evolution and no longer be tied down to this earthly plane. Okay, so 1,000,000, if you can do 1,000,000 years of evolution in this lifetime, you're guaranteed to be liberated from this particular form of existence. Without the spinal breath, you won't be able to evolve that fast. If you spend your time on other nadis or other techniques. So that's why the Kriya Yoga is called Yogananda called it the jet plane, airplane of spiritual evolution. We can call it the rocket ship. They didn't have rocket ship at that time, but you know, so it's very fast. Comparatively, you can get, you know, into self-realization in 12 years, 20 years, 30 years. Why does it vary? It's supposed to be a scientific process. Everybody who practices it should evolve, should get rid of their karma and evolve, okay? My master, Yogi Raj, teaches that when you inhale, you expand your consciousness, and as you exhale down, you burn away your past evil karma. Okay, so that's the motion of inhale and exhale, which is what Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. He calls the Kriya Pranayama the inner fire ceremony, where you offer up the incoming breath to the outgoing breath. Okay, so he's also describing the Kriya Pranayama. So without that, you're not truly practicing Kriya Yoga without the spinal breath. So that's the first thing. The second thing, the first is that Babaji is the one that has given us it has to come from that lineage, it comes from him. Second is the spinal breath. The third is that it is a system that is very useful or is meant for householders. So Babaji didn't give it for monks. Okay, he gave it to Lahiri Masai, who is a householder. Okay, Lahiri Masai was a great being, an avatar, stature. So he was able to bring the dead back to life, just like the Lord Jesus was able to. Okay, so that is the power of the Lahiri Masai's Kriya Yoga. So he's not an ordinary being. Okay, so but he was a householder. He had children. Okay, he had family. He even worked. He was working when he was initiated by Babaji into Kriya Yoga. Okay, so it's not necessary to give up your life or leave the world to practice Kriya Yoga. That's a characteristic of this Kriya Yoga that we're practicing. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about this mysterious being called Babaji, since he's supposed to be the founder. So what do we know about him? Who is he? Okay, so my master, Yogi Raj, is the first one actually to identify who Babaji was in previous lifetimes and traced him to different manifestations. Because this Babaji is a Mahavatar of Lord Shiva. A Mahavatar is different from an avatar. An avatar comes in for one lifetime, and then he or she leaves this world and disappears. They came for a particular purpose. When that purpose is done, they leave. The Mahavatar Babaji has come and manifested for millions and millions of years to guide the spiritual evolution of humanity. So he doesn't leave his responsibility. He's there, even though whether he can appear anywhere, he can appear in our heart, he can appear in the Aurora Borealis, just like he appeared in the light to Lahiri Mahasaya or to Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar. If you try to see him, he disappears. And so, because his being is, his grossest being is light. He's finer than light. He's a great Mahavatar who's been around for millions and millions of years to guide not just the current crop of human beings, even previous beings on Earth and other planets. So his work is to evolve us. And he's the one who has been giving us a lot of different methods to do that. Okay. So my master identified him as previously he had appeared around 900 AD to 1000 AD in the form of a great yogi called Garaksha, who is recognized as a manifestation or an avatar of Lord Shiva. Now, this Gorakshanath has many fantastic, crazy stories told about him all over India. He's a very famous yogi, and he's of the Nath Sampradaya, Nath lineage. And in previous incarnations, he had founded the Nath lineage as well. So he's this great being. But, you know, how do we relate him to Babaji? How do we know? Well, first of all, there's a story that is told about Gorakshanath. There, at a certain time, there was a king in India who had a very beautiful wife, and he had great wealth. You know, he was called Bhartari, and this king was out selecting a location. He was going to build a golden palace, a new palace. He had his heart set on that. He was also greatly in love with his wife, but for some whatever crazy idea came into his mind, he was wondering how faithful, while I'm away for so long, is my wife faithful to me, and is she really in love with me? So he sent a message through a messenger that he had died, to test the loyalty of his wife. His wife was also a very advanced being, but she knew that he was being tested. He was testing her. But she said, hey, I have to show my loyalty. So she threw herself in the funeral pyre and was burned to death. When Bhartari came back and he found that, he was so upset. He was inconsolate. He was crying over the funeral pyre of his wife, Ingla. So while he was doing all this crying and all this stuff, this grand yogi, Gorakhnath, comes and throws down his begging bowl and starts to cry. And that really, attracted the attention of Bhartari. And he said, "What are you crying over a broken bowl for? I'll give you a golden bowl. There's no stop crying. What kind of yogi are you?" And Gorakhnath said, "Fine, give me a new bowl, but I can actually give you a new queen." And he waved his hand, and there was 25 queens, all looking the same, arose from the funeral pyre. And Bhartari couldn't tell which one was the real one. And then the real one said, "I'm the real one." And the others disappeared, and she wanted to hug him, but he'd already, during his grief, he had already made up his mind to give up his kingly life and to go into deep meditation to achieve self-realization. So he immediately realized that his teacher is this yogi that had come, correct now. So he immediately paid his, obedience to Gorakhnath and followed him away and left his wife. Okay, and then he became a great yogi, almost immortal. Now you remember the story started because he was actually out trying to build a golden palace. He never completed that. In the autobiography, there's a story of how Lahiri Masaya met with Babaji. And in that story, Babaji manifested a golden palace for Lahiri Masaya. So when people first read that, they ask why to this simple clerk who was a railroad clerk, Bengali person, what's he got to do with a golden palace? Why did Babaji manifest a golden palace for him? That's because he was in the previous lifetime the King Bhartari. And even when he attained to the higher states of consciousness, Babaji has deliberately kept that desire for the palace and kept the desire for the queen in his subconscious at certain seeds so that he could come back into this world as an avatar and be born as Lahiri Masaya. So the correlation between those two stories, the Gorakhnath story with King Bhartari and Babaji's story from the autobiography with the Lahiri Masaya, shows that Babaji must be Gorakshanath. In the previous times, he had appeared. See, Babaji, he was never born, and he was never born of a woman, and he was never died. He has never died. Okay, so he appears in certain forms, in certain times. Sometimes he would come and spend some years teaching. Sometimes he would just come to one particular person. It is said that he actually initiated Adi Shankaracharya, the great Vedantist, in around 800 AD or so, who is also an avatar. Babaji actually is guiding him. And Babaji initiated Ram, and Babaji initiated even Lord Krishna. Okay, because Babaji can appear in the form of Lord Shiva. You have to understand that the primordial, the universal Lord Shiva himself would not be able to come to earth. Earth wouldn't even be able to sustain an iota of the power of the Lord Shiva, the primordial Param Shiv. So it is Mahavatar that come as in his form as Lord Shiva and does the work of Lord Shiva. All these yogas that we're talking about, the yogas of this and yoga of that, they all come from Lord Shiva. And Babaji, Shiv Garaksha Babaji, is the manifestation in this world of Lord Shiva. So all of these actually come from him. There is a famous text called Garaksha Shattuck, 100 verses of Garaksha Nath, which is a text on Kundalini Yoga, on Hatha and Kundalini Yoga. And it was written around or put together in around 1000 AD or so. And it predates all the other Hatha Yoga texts. All the other Hatha Yoga texts come a couple of hundred years later. Okay, this text actually gives the descriptions of the chakras and talks about how to awaken the Kundalini. And then it actually gives certain techniques. So it has a certain portion. It is 100 verses. Some verses are about basic Hatha Yoga, some about the Kundalini and chakras. And then there's verses which are about the Kriya, the techniques of spinal breath and Jyoti Mudra, Mahamudra. All of these are in that particular text. So in that 100 verses, you actually have Hatha, Kundalini, and Kriya Yoga. Okay, so it's all connected to Babaji because he did this work when he was called Gorakshanath. We call him Babaji, but he's called by my master as the nameless one because he has got so many names, has been around so much, so many times. We would run out of space to put all the names he's come as in the millions of years. That is the great work of Shiv Garaksha Babaji. He is the giver of not just the Kriya Yoga, which of course is the great thing he's given in this particular time frame to modern man, but he also in past times have given the Kundalini Yoga. So that is the great work. And I wanted to connect that so you understand that there is no disconnect. I mean, we can practice different things, but we must all realize that if we are attracted to the Kundalini Yoga methodology, or we are attracted to the Kriya Yoga methodology, or we are attracted to Bhakti Yoga, or Karma Yoga, or Gyan Yoga, it's all fine. You know, there are so many pathways because there's so many different temperaments of people. We have so much different karma that we have accumulated over our lifetimes. So some people work better with Kriya Yoga, some will work better with the approach of Kundalini Yoga or the other types of yoga. Okay, if there was only one type of yoga necessary for everybody, or sufficient for everybody, then the Lord will not give, the Lord of Yoga, Shiv Garaksha Babaji, would not have given so many different techniques. It's because we have so much different desires and so much different likes and dislikes to get us to evolve He has given us so many methods. So choose one, find one, and walk that path with all your effort. Persevere with all your might, and you will succeed in the goal of evolving to who you're meant to be. You're not going to evolve to somebody else. You're just evolving to who you're meant to be, right? It's your highest potential. Give yourself a chance to realize your highest potential. That is the pathways of self-realization. Now, just as an aside, you know, in the 80s, I was not able to, you know, there was no internet, there's no, you know, ways of learning or meeting. Sometimes I was working so hard I couldn't have time to search after yogis. During that particular time, I actually used the methodology of correspondence classes a lot. Okay, and one of the correspondence classes that I joined actually was giving the Kundalini Yoga, and in the text, it turns out, I found out when I was studying it, that it was actually the techniques given by the Swami Satyananda Saraswati, who was also a disciple of Swami Sivananda of Rishikesh. And this Swami Satyananda Saraswati, he founded the Bihar School of Yoga, and he wrote a lot of books, and people used his techniques and his books to teach the Kundalini Yoga, because he had Hatha and Kundalini Yoga techniques. And in that class, it was actually the first part was all about the chakras and like what I was describing. And in the second part, he actually had 21 techniques, which he called Kriya Yoga. Now, you have to be very careful. There are actually books of from the Bihar School of Yoga, and they put down this Kriya Yoga, but this Kriya Yoga is not the same. It's a very powerful set of techniques to move the Kundalini and the Pran after you've awakened the chakras, like what I was saying about the continuation of Kundalini Yoga. But it has nothing to do with the Kriya Yoga that of Lahiri Mahasaya. Okay, so although it's called Kriya, be careful, because those techniques are very powerful, but they move the energy in a different way. And I practiced some of that, and I found that although they're nice, they can cause some confusion for practitioners. And I would not recommend, if you're doing the Sushumna Nadi breathing, the Kriya Yoga of Lahiri Mahasaya, you shouldn't be doing that Kriya Yoga, which is not coming from the same lineage. Okay, and then there is another. In the early 90s, I actually had correspondence class, and it was called I forget the exact name, but it was a group that was teaching something called the Cobra Breath, and it was a tantric group, and I got the lessons, and you know, it was a different kind of Kriya, but they talked a lot about Babaji, but all their information about Babaji was coming from Autobiography or from other students of Lahiri Mahasaya and Sri Yukteswar. So it had, you know, the techniques also had nothing to do with the techniques given through Lahiri Mahasaya by Babaji. So that's something else you need to be aware of. There's can be all sorts of, even there are techniques called Kriya Yoga, which has nothing to do with Kriya Yoga. There are groups that will trace their techniques to Babaji, and they're not. They can call it different names, but they're also not the same as Kriya Yoga. They all have their ways and their use. Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure that you understand and don't get confused, and try to mix things up. Okay. Many paths are good. Like if you have got a recipe for a particular dish, okay, and it's an Indian dish, and then you have another dish which is from a different culture. If you try to mix them up, they're not going to taste right. You cannot mix the ingredients together. Okay, so the same, if you are following a particular pathway, like the Kriya Yoga given through the lineage of Lahiri Mahasaya, and you try to mix other techniques with it, you don't know. You're not a master. You don't know what the final outcome was, how they clash or not clash with each other. So one does not do mix and match when it comes to such things. Okay, so you have to be very careful. There was another group that I was exposed to, and I actually liked and worked with for years. Also, it was actually a Tamil Kriya Yoga. Okay, founded by Yogi Ramaya of South India, and he claimed to have an experience of Babaji. And Babaji gave him these techniques, and there were like 144 kriyas. Okay, from what I gathered, and my practice of it for some time, and I liked it because it seemed to be a Kundalini type of yoga from South India, from the siddhas of South India. So I don't know why they couldn't keep calling it Kriya Yoga or not try to use that name, but it's a legitimate path from Yogi Ramaya, but I would rather call it the Tamil Kriya Yoga, and it does not have anything to do with the Kriya Yoga from Lahiri Mahasaya to Sri Yukteswar to Yogananda. Okay. Now, Yogananda, when he came to the US in 1920, he had to modify the Kriya Yoga. So he gave a simplified version of the mantra to use with the breath. He let the people sit on the floor. He sometimes did not teach them the Khetri Mudra. Okay, so he made modifications, but that's because as a master, he has to suit his disciples, his students, and the time and culture. Okay, so it's a modified form of Kriya, but it still has the same names, and the effect, the basic core principle is the same. And the most important are the techniques such as, the Kriya Pranayama, the Omkar Kriyas, the Mahamudra, Jyoti Mudra, Nabho Kriya. These are all names of techniques that would be common among the Kriya Yoga that comes from Lahiri Mahasaya's lineage. So my own master, Yogi Raj, he had originally learned the Kriya, given initiated in Kriya, by two disciples of Sri Yukteswar, Satyananda Giri and also Hariharananda Giri. So these were both disciples of Sri Yukteswar. Satyananda Giri was a good friend of Yogananda. They were best friends actually at Sri Yukteswar's ashram. But then Yogananda went to US and Satyananda Giri stayed in India. Okay, so he was a very advanced disciple of Sri Yukteswar. And then later on, Yogi Raj had his own experience of Babaji. And Babaji blessed him in his teaching. But Originally, my master got the authorization to teach also from Hariharananda in the physical world, but his highest authority comes directly from Babaji, and that comes to the point of like, you know, a lot of people claim to have an experience of Babaji, and I can claim an experience of Babaji, or I have experience of Lord Murugan. But does that mean my experience the same as my master's experience, or some other person's experience? Another person says I had coffee and tea with Babaji. Hard to say, but you know, the mysterious thing is that the divine beings, they can give us their blessings and appear to us according to our own capability and capacity. Okay, so if you, again, I use electricity because obviously my background is in electronics when I was a student, and back way engineering in when I was young, and so it goes back to that. I mean, if you hold on to a 5-volt battery, a 1.5-volt battery, you're not going to get damaged. You won't have any problem. Okay, small electricity. But if you touch the 1,000 volts or with a high current, you're going to be roasted, or if you're hit by lightning, okay, you're not going to usually live through that experience. All right, so the divine beings, they can appear to us to our own capabilities. That means that when Babaji appears to some great master like Yogi Raj, he's coming at a much higher vibration and power than if he came to some other person. If he chooses to appear to someone of a less capability, then he would lower himself down. He would transform his power down to a lower level to be able to connect with somebody. So you have to understand, not all experiences are the same. So, it doesn't mean that if I say I have an experience of Lord Murugan, it doesn't mean that I have the ultimate experience. I've only got the experience according to what I could capacitate, what I can sustain, which may not be very much. Okay, another great yogi may have a greater experience of Lord Murugan. So that is something to keep in mind. All right. So people may claim to have experience of Babaji, but how have they been transformed? Okay, my master, not to blow trumpet or say my master is the best, but he is able to demonstrate the powers of a Kriya Yogi. Okay, so a Kriya Yogi is not a helpless, weak person. So the Shakti Kundalini is not a weak power or energy. There is strength, there is power. Okay, so the path we are on is not a weak one. It's a very powerful one. All Kundalini Yoga, all Kriya Yoga is powerful. And those who have achieved certain states of accomplishment will be able to demonstrate that kind of energy and power. They're not going to come across as somebody, weak and unable to talk properly or something like that. So you have to be very careful to understand that. Spirituality is not always meek, depends on the path of that spirituality. The Kriya and Kundalini yogas are paths of power, just like Vajrayana is a path of power. Thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed this description of Kundalini and Kriya Yoga. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Anandamananda Karaprasanam Yana Swarupam Nijaboda Rupam Yogendra Mediam Bavarogya Vaidyam Srimat Gurum Nityam Maham Bhajami. Om